Hello and welcome. I'm Ed, and I'm here with my wife, Mary.
Hello, we're excited you're joining us today. As you might already know, we're Branch Davidian Seventh-day Adventists.
That's right, and we present or expound on a principle or belief related to the SDA Sabbath School Quarterly each week. This quarter's lesson is entitled In the Crucible with Christ. This week's study is entitled Seeing the Invisible. Friday's first discussion question asks, quote, as a class, talk about the kinds of things we believe in that we do not see, things that we know are real yet are beyond our sight. How can this help us understand what it means to see Him who is invisible? Close quote, Sabbath School Quarterly Lesson, Friday, August 19th, 2022.
This question harkens back to the memory verse for the week, which is Hebrews 11:27. It reads, quote, by faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible, close quote. That's Hebrews 11:27. The lesson then reads, quote, the definition of faith in the book of Hebrews is always challenging. Now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Hebrews 11:1. How can we be sure about what we do not see? Yet this is exactly what Moses illustrates in our memory verse, quote, he persevered because he saw him who is invisible, close quote, Hebrews 11:27. That's Sabbath School Quarterly Lesson, Saturday, August 13th, 2022.
Now, the lesson doesn't say one way or the other whether the things that are unseen are non-physical, but when most people talk about believing in things they don't see, they automatically start thinking that we are talking about a wholly different realm from what we experience with our senses, a non-physical realm. So the first thing we will need to address in this study is that what Hebrews 11 is talking about? Is it even talking about a non-physical realm?
Interestingly, in all the places in the Bible that speak of things that are invisible or not seen, it never implies that those things are non-physical. In fact, they are always physical. When Scripture refers to something as not seen, it isn't saying it's impossible to see it in principle. It's just a simple statement that the people in question haven't seen the thing being spoken of. Consider, for example, Paul's statement in Colossians 2, verse 1, where he says, quote, for I desire to have you know how greatly I struggle for you, and for those in Laodicea, and for as many as have not seen my face in the flesh, close quote.
Obviously, Paul was a real physical being and could be seen. He was just not seen by certain people. Likewise, John 1:18 tells us that no one has seen God, yet in Matthew 18:10, Jesus tells us that there are angels in heaven who always see the face of his Father. Clearly then, even though God is not seen by us and thus invisible to us, this doesn't mean that God is literally unseeable. According to Jesus, God actually is seen. We'll come back to this.
Another important passage is John 20, verses 24 through 29, the story of doubting Thomas. In verse 29, Jesus says, quote, because you have seen me, have you believed? Blessed are those who have not seen and have believed, close quote. Obviously, Jesus was saying this as a real physical being and was being seen by his disciples while he spoke these words. The fact that he had not been seen by some had nothing to do with his nature, but had everything to do with the fact that he hadn't gone to them.
In addition to showing us that not seen doesn't mean unseeable or non-physical, this passage in John also has something else to teach us about Hebrews 11:1. Both passages are often interpreted as though they support the idea that we should believe things with insufficient evidence. In other words, people think that believing without seeing is the same as believing without evidence. But this isn't the case. When people have a desire to only believe in things that they see, it's not that they are demanding evidence, it's that they are relying on their personal experience. And that's what Jesus rebuked Thomas for. Thomas was relying on his personal experience rather than on relying on the evidence he already had that Jesus had appeared to multiple people at once.
This is far better evidence than personally seeing Jesus, since a personal experience could always be a delusion. The fact that Jesus had appeared to multiple disciples at once meant that it couldn't be a hallucination. Again, this is better evidence than any personal experience could be. Jesus wasn't rebuking a demand for evidence. This isn't what Thomas demanded. He demanded a personal experience. Obviously, as Jesus pointed out, all of us could not have a personal experience in seeing and touching the risen Jesus. But there is other evidence that we can have that is more reliable upon which we can base our faith.
We shouldn't believe in something without sufficient evidence that it's true. And this is just what Ellen White said in her chapter on What to Do with Doubt in Steps to Christ. She said, quote, God never asks us to believe without giving sufficient evidence upon which to base our faith. His existence, his character, the truthfulness of his word are all established by testimony that appeals to our reason, and this testimony is abundant. Yet God has never removed the possibility of doubt. Our faith must rest upon evidence, not demonstration. Those who wish to doubt will have opportunity, while those who really desire to know the truth will find plenty of evidence on which to rest their faith. Close quote, Ellen White, Steps to Christ, page 105.
So Ellen's point here is that if we don't have sufficient evidence for something, God does not ask us to believe it. Now, it is possible for us to doubt anything, even with sufficient evidence, like Thomas had. As we've seen, Thomas already had sufficient evidence, but he made the mistake of depending on having a personal experience.
From the example of Thomas and Jesus, we know that seeing something isn't the same as having evidence that something exists. We have evidence of lots of things that we do not have visual access to. Let's give another example of past history. We cannot see George Washington with our eyes today, but we have evidence that he did exist because historical evidence bears this out. He was a physical being who interacted with his physical surroundings over 200 years ago, and because of this, there is physical evidence of his existence that we can observe today. There are his writings, letters written to him, contemporary writings about him, his home, his impact on the course of American history, etc. There is sufficient evidence that we can access from the physical world to lead us to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that George Washington existed, even though we can't see him today with our eyes.
Also, consider light. Humans can only see a small portion of the light spectrum, but we can know that other parts of the spectrum exist by the way they interact with other physical objects, like other animals' sensory organs or scientific instruments. Same thing with sound. There are lots of sounds we can't hear with our human senses, but other animals can hear them, and we can measure these physical sound waves with scientific instruments. We have sufficient evidence to believe that there are frequencies of sound waves that are physically all around us that can't be detected by human ears, but because there are other ways of detecting them, we can know they exist.
So just because we personally can't hear someone or see something is no reason in and of itself to think that it doesn't physically exist. Whether or not we should believe something is purely a matter of whether or not there is sufficient evidence to show that it's true. And we shouldn't demand that the evidence comes in a way that gives us a personal experience. It might not even be something we can directly sense with our limited human senses, yet it does have to be something we can establish to be factual using empirical methods and sound reasoning.
The early followers of Jesus had real evidence that God had acted in history by raising Jesus from the dead, and we can know that the invisible but not unseeable God exists today based on several lines of evidence, including the evidence for Jesus' resurrection, which shows that God has power over death. This, together with God's acts in history since that time, lets us know that there is today a living God in heaven. This is real evidence that we shouldn't ignore, like Thomas did. We will have links to studies entitled The Historicity of the Resurrection, Parts 1 and 2 in the description for more on that. With this evidence before us, to doubt God simply because we haven't had a personal visual experience of God is in no way behaving like someone who just wants evidence. It is actually ignoring evidence while demanding something far less reliable, personal experience.
So when the Bible talks about things we can't see, is it talking about a non-physical realm? As we've seen, the answer is no. The Bible presents God as having hands, feet, loins, a head with hair, and a face, an entire physical body that sits on a throne and looks down from heaven and sends his mighty angels to earthly missions on his behalf. The Bible does say that there are indeed physical beings and things that are shielded from our view, but does not give the idea that the unseen is non-physical. On the contrary, the Scriptures consistently present these things as physical or material. We have many writings from the early SDA pioneers that overtly promote materialism using reason, logic, and Scripture. The SDA pioneers were materialists. They believed that everything that exists is made up of matter, even God, Jesus, angels, heaven, everything. Materialism is the foundation of all our SDA doctrines. For more on this, we'll provide a link to the study Materialism, Our Forgotten Foundation, which contains a wonderful collection of SDA pioneer writings on the subject.
As we have pointed out in past studies, Ellen White counseled us to base our beliefs on scientific experiment. See Chapter 12, False Impressions Concerning Experience, in Christian Temperance and Bible Hygiene, linked in the description for deeper study on this, along with other studies on this topic. So long as these experiments are carried out with all the rigor and honesty that Ellen White called for, rather than being biased toward confirming our beliefs, they are our best and only way of learning what the evidence is and what we should believe, whether we can see it with our eyes or not. We simply need to follow the evidence no matter what it is and no matter where it leads. Faith is simply trust. It shouldn't form the basis of our beliefs, but it is how we should respond to evidence. We should trust the evidence and the conclusions established by the evidence rather than doubting simply because we haven't had a personal experience.
Thank you for staying with us till the end. We invite you to visit our website, www.bdsda.com, to learn more about who we are and, just as important, who we are not. Please join us each week as we will continue to offer new and interesting insights for your Sabbath School studies.
And if you want to keep up with our new studies as they are published, we recommend subscribing. We are on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on plenty of other podcast apps. Links for subscribing are in the description.
God bless.
Many blessings.